It's Thursday, December 15th, 2022. Or is today the 16th? I don't even remember at this point. The holidays confuse me. I'll just put it at that. And that means it's a holiday edition of the Knee Jerks podcast. That's Detroit Sports Talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al the Equation, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger, Al Beaton. Joining me for the first time in what feels like a decade is the man you know as Eno, Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog and numerous. He's got his fingers everywhere online. Greg, welcome back to the show. You've been kind of missed anyway. Nick was a great replacement. You almost got Wally pipped.
It's great to be back, Al. It's been, we were talking before the show, not since October 18th have I been here with you.
Yeah.
Missed the first, and then Nick Milanovic filled in for me November 15th and 29th. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Nick, who
yes.
I thought he did a great job with the show. He kind of got thrown in there. And I thought he did a great job. You guys, I thought, really hit it off.
A fresh perspective was actually kind of nice because he's a little less cynical than the two of us, to say the least.
Yeah.
He
So
brought a little more positivity, and maybe a kind of a babe in the woods kind of thing compared to us. Us been rolling around watching the sausage has been made for 20 years. So.
Well, Nick. Well, he shares a lot of my cynicism. He just maybe didn't come through on the show, but he's he did a great job. I appreciate that, and we're always happy to. We know we can bring him in if we ever wanted a guest or.
Yeah, because he would really love, he even told me he would really love to talk a little baseball history.
Okay.
And it might be something we could touch on maybe when baseball season rolls around, and we can. Touch on going back to the Detroit Wolverines.
Wow.
Back in the 1880s and such like that. So, but no, it was a lot of fun having Nick on the show. Can't wait to have him back either as a substitute or just here to talk sports with the two of us.
That's when the Detroit team was in the National League.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Catch me there every Monday, although I did have a bonus article on Wednesday about Mike Leach. Monday was about the Lions. And follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. So follow Nick Milanovic on Twitter as far as that goes, at Nick Milanovic, Milanovich, and follow him there. So tonight we've got a really kind of going to run the gamut of all four sports, I think, if we have time. We also are going to bring back Jerk of the Week because we did do that when I was gone. Well, that's going to be back. The birthday game is going to be here. Speaking of which, before we get into any of the topics, let's indeed play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. If Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive Michigan Rummy.
Remember playing that as a kid, and then I advanced on to euchre. So,
right.
I can't remember the last time I actually played rummy. I'll say that much.
Well, we'll see.
All right.
This person now made his name in the world of football. He was born on this date in 1964, so he's 58 today. He's very well known locally because of the 6 teams he played for. 5 teams he played for. One of them was here in Detroit. I will say he was a defensive player, and I will say that he was not small. I'll just put it leave it at that.
And he said football?
Yeah.
Football. Football around a little younger than us, so which would put his heyday in the 80s. Yeah, back when our heyday.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. And he was not small. And he said he played for 6 teams, one of them here.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just try Jerry Ball.
Oh, my gosh. You got it. Boy, I tell you, talk about not being rusty. Goodness gracious. Jerry Ball is correct. The rotund one.
Yeah.
It was funny. CBS would always list his weight at 295. I'm like, if he's 295, I'm a monkey's uncle.
Yeah.
He was more like 330.
Yeah.
He was 6'1". He was a very, very good player for a period of time. He was the first time, excuse me, All-Pro in 1991.
Yes.
3-time Pro Bowler. Played on the 1998 Vikings team that won 15-1. When he paired with John Randall as two huge run stuffers for the Vikings. Jerry Ball was a good football player.
Yes, he
went
was.
to SMU, and unfortunately missed the Lions playoff victory in '91 because he, I think, hurt a knee. He was blocked by I don't know if you remember this. Brad Baxter, the running back for the Jets. It was one of those plays where Ball was engaged.
The kind of block that's illegal today.
And Baxter gave him a completely illegal. It was called for too. Block below the knees, and Ball put Ball out for the rest of the year. And Ball was so incensed, he waited for. I don't know if you remember this. He waited for Baxter outside as the teams were going to the tunnel. He was waiting for Baxter to confront him, and they kept him away from it. He probably would have torn Baxter to pieces. And Baxter was. I'm not sure if Baxter was suspended or fined. It was a pretty nasty, dirty play.
Yeah.
And that knocked Ball out for the rest of the season. So he missed the playoff victory, and he missed the NFC Championship game. But Jerry Ball, 58 years old today. Good job, and you give Michigan rummy.
And I'll have to learn to play, relearn rummy, or unlearn euchre. I think it'd be easier to learn rummy rather than unlearn euchre. Like I said, like I told you before we go, I'm going to Florida, and I'll be there early on a Wednesday. My dad's euchre club plays Wednesday night, so he's all excited because he can now take me to euchre club twice because I'm staying for 10 days. So, and it seems like lately the only time I play euchre is when I go to Florida with all the retired Michiganders down there. So, it's Jerry Ball, blast from the past when the Lions actually had a good defense in the 90s. They had a great defense at times in the 90s. They really did. That was one of those teams where they were always a quarterback away. Always a quarterback away.
Yeah.
And Wayne Fonts could never find his quarterback. And we'll kind of touch on this because in a lot of ways, what's going on now with the Lions, Greg, is very similar to mid-90s Lions, but we'll touch on them. Like I said, we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, we're going to do some little more big picture stuff with the Lions since Sunday's game was obviously quite a while ago now. And I'm sure Greg's got lots to talk about when it comes to the Lions, as he is a known hater of the Lions. Obviously, the Tigers have made some interesting moves, but still have some gaping holes in their offense. They've added a couple starting pitchers. We'll touch on that. Scott Harris, what he's up to. And if we get a chance, we'll talk about Cade Cunningham's season being over at the Pistons and what's going on for the Red Wings, who are being decimated by injuries right now, and their schedule is getting tougher, and their record is starting to reflect both of those issues. So, all right, with that, Greg, let's start with the Lions because everybody in this town seems to be talking about the Lions, and it's in 6 weeks. It's gone from Dan Campbell getting essentially about 2 months ago. Dan Campbell got a vote of confidence from Sheila Ford Hamp, and today, Dan Campbell's gone from the vote of confidence and being a kneecap biting meathead joke of a coach to now he's being considered crazy like a fox, and he is being considered in the thick of the NFL Coach of the Year race. It's to the point where the national media are issuing me culpas in regard to their opinions of Dan Campbell, especially now that the Lions are 5-1. I believe they've really turned the season around to the point where the playoffs are not out of the question. We'll kind of talk about that, but I don't know about you, Greg. I was expecting to see some improvement this year. Like I said, I was predicting 5 or 6 wins, and they've already matched that prediction. They're 6 and 7 right now. You were predicting anywhere from 1 to 3, so they've blown you up. But I got to say, I'm happily surprised. But I also think there was a little bit of an overreaction to how well the Lions are playing just because they've been so bad for so long.
Well, let's see what happens when I go away for a couple of months. And
so if they lose against the Jets Sunday, it's your fault.
Well, hey, I mean, even I have to admit that they are playing good football, clean football.
Very good football.
They're not making bonehead mistakes. Campbell's not making bonehead mistakes. Goff's not making bonehead mistakes.
Yep.
It's 6 weeks out of a 17-game season, but it has put them back into
they're on the fringes of the wild card. They're, as I say, they're on the graphic when the pregame and postgame shows talk about the playoffs. They're on the graphic, and that hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, in this time, this is the time of the year where teams can be in the picture, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But the caveat to that, and I know we're going to get into a lot of other things but real quick, just to jump to the playoff thing real quick. The caveat to the playoff thing, and people have got to kind of slow the roll on this, because even though the Lions beat both the Commanders and the Giants, which are two of the three teams that are in front of them right now.
Yeah.
The problem is that the Giants and the Commanders tied each other.
That tie killed them.
Both have 7-5-1 records. So it's I know the media they like to say, well, the Lions hold a tiebreaker advantage over those teams because they beat them. Well, that's fine, except that I don't see a scenario.
They'll have less losses
where a tie would need to be broken. Right. Yeah. I don't see a scenario where there would be a tie.
Unless the Lions have a tie of their own. That's the only way.
Right. Because what's going to happen, I mean, if if one of those teams finishes 9-7-1 and the Lions finish 9-8, well, obviously the Lions don't make the playoffs. But the Lions run the table, go 10-7. Then they do beat a 9-7-1 team. But there really won't be a tie to be broken here. Unless, like you said, the Lions also tie one of these last 4 games. So people have to kind of keep that in perspective in terms of their tie-breaking.
Yeah, and also the fact they still need a lot of help. They need they need a lot of things to go their way when it comes to, like tonight. What is it? I got it on my television right now. San Francisco and Seattle play tonight. I believe the Lions really need San Francisco to win tonight. Because I believe the Seahawks are 7-6 right now. So that's a team that's in the if they don't win a division, which is still in the realm for them. Yeah, if you look at the standings right now, when it comes, my light, it's hard to leap over several teams. And surprisingly, the Lions have at this point, but there's still a couple teams that kind of have an advantage over them, and they need a couple losses from those teams. They really do.
Well, yeah, I mean, they need losses, but the other thing too is probably, they've got 3 of their last 4 games on the road, which
that's a good point. Yeah,
I don't care who you're playing. I mean, you're in Green Bay, you're in Carolina, you're at the Jets. I mean, I don't care who you are playing. If you're playing on the road at this time of the year, and those are all outdoor stadiums, although Carolina's not in bad weather, of course, but I mean that's not easy either. Their only breather might be against the Bears at home, but those 3 games out of 4 on the road are not going to be easy. But here's the thing, Al. I mean, even if the Lions don't make the playoffs, which I still don't think they will, what at least has happened, what I will begrudgingly say, is that they are playing. Here we are, December. They have a game on December 18th that means something.
Yeah,
and I have to admit that I can't run away from that. They have a game on December 18th that does mean something. And now
and don't forget, it means something for both teams, because the Jets are in a lot of ways are the Lions of the AFC.
This is right. This is really kind of fascinating. I was thinking about this today because earlier in the year, back when the Lions were really stumbling, and I said. The fans, when things start to go bad like that, the fans start to look at other teams and start to do some comparing. And I said, they're comparing, the Lions fans are comparing the Jets to the Lions because of the Robert Saleh thing. Saleh was we thought going to be hired by the Lions after the 2020 season. He wasn't. He was hired by the Jets.
And there were reports that he did want the job.
Right. So, here he is, Dearborn native. All signs seem to point to the Lions. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. So now, ever since then, he and Dan Campbell have been kind of compared because they're kind of joined at the hip as far as the Lions fans are concerned. I'm not so sure that the Jets fans doesn't necessarily look at he and Campbell that way. The
Mhm.
Lions fans look at Campbell and Saleh that way.
Mhm.
So now you had some comparing going on. The Jets got off to a decent start, and the Lions didn't. Sauce Gardner, the defensive back who the Jets
Yep.
picked, got off to a decent start. Aiden Hutchinson didn't.
Mhm.
So there was that kind of a comparison going on. Now here we are, 14 weeks later, and it's 7-6 Jets. You mentioned they're like the Lions of the AFC. By the way, they're like the Lions of the AFC in a lot of other ways too. By the way.
Oh yeah.
But they're 7-6 against a team, the Lions 6-7. So both teams are kind of come back to each other.
Mhm.
And now there was a Dan Campbell said, well, we really didn't seriously consider Sauce Gardner. We always wanted Aiden Hutchinson, which I completely agree with and understand.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what, as far as defensive rookie of the year, I don't know who's going to win that. But so now we come to Saleh against Campbell.
Mhm.
And now, they're almost so that's kind of interesting. It's kind of a side story.
And the other thing to bring up with this is that the Jets have what some say it may be an elite defense, and the Lions' strength is an offense that is one of those. They've scored 30 points or more 7 times this year. So there's another, the immovable force versus the unmovable object kind of thing. So
yeah,
you got that matchup as well. And Campbell has more known as an offensive mind, and Saleh is known more as a defensive mind. So there's a lot of interesting contrasts with this game, and the fact that it means a hell of a lot to both teams. I would say more to the Jets because they are much more solidified in the playoff race than the Lions are right now.
Yes, there's no question about that. But it's just that it's interesting to me that they would be playing each other now with both teams needing to win this game when there was so much comparison going on.
Right.
Somebody ran a poll the other day. I think I saw it on Twitter or maybe it was in the newspaper. Would you rather have Dan Campbell or Robert Saleh as your coach now? Well, obviously, overwhelmingly, everybody wants Campbell. I mean, because based on what's been happening lately.
Right.
But Saleh, the Jets weren't very good last year. It wasn't like Saleh came out of the gate and lit New York on fire. But they are playing, they're okay. I mean, they're hanging in there. They're not a great team, but they're hanging in there. They got this quarterback, Mike White, who Dan Campbell really has a lot of respect for. He's kind of come out of nowhere, this White guy. So, we'll see.
Yeah. It's even still though, it's something how the image of Dan Campbell, especially nationwide, has changed considerably. That when they were 1-6, and there was talk Campbell might be on the hot seat, and obviously Sheila Ford Hamp came out and said she supported the regime, so on and so forth. And now Dan Campbell's seemingly everywhere. He was just on Pat McAfee of all things, telling jokes and honestly telling a story that obviously wasn't true about the Penei Sewell trick play. Where he said he was so mesmerized by the wave he didn't know the play happened, when that was obviously not true. Even though and there were media members actually bought it, which I could not believe.
Right.
And then there's talk of Dan Campbell being, he's not going to win Coach of the Year because that's probably going to go to Kelly's head coach. And you got to get an argument for Saleh as well. There's a couple other guys out there. And also there's the fact that all of a sudden now we have his protege, Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, is now being talked about as a future head coaching candidate. Because he was essentially when Campbell took over as offensive coordinator last year, halfway through the year, essentially Johnson became his right-hand man running the offense. He was the tight ends coach last year. And he was given the reins of the offense this year. And all of a sudden, he's got Jared Goff playing like it's 2018 again. And he's pulling plays out of his ass that are actually, I would say Ben Johnson's offense right now is very, very fun to watch because it's very, very unpredictable. I like it when the Penei Sewell tackle eligible first down pass that essentially locked up the game on Sunday. I just broke out laughing. because even the announcers of the game are like, what's going on with this 300-pound tackle in motion? And the next thing you know, he's in the flat, wide open for an easy first down and essentially seals the game. It's like, I'm laughing about it right now, even thinking about it. But that's the kind of stuff that, obviously it's great when it works. If it had failed, there probably would have been all kinds of hell to pay. But it was such a well-constructed play because the Lions had run other things out of that same formation this season, and even in this game where they would have Sewell do something similar, but he would block. And it was obvious that that's what the Vikings thought he was going to do. And then this time around, they threw the pass. And it was, and if Ben Johnson is coming up with this kind of inventive offense, that's a huge game changer for the Lions. Because when's the last time this team has actually had there's been a couple guys here and there, but maybe on defense specifically, but not on offense, because we've had such wet fish as offensive coordinators in Detroit, like Jim Bob Cooter and Joe Lombardi, guys like that. To see an inventive offensive mind running the Lions offense is a huge breath of fresh air. And him I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job this time around, but if things continue to go as well as they are right now, he definitely could be in line for a gig in a couple years.
It's funny because these coordinators just sometimes, though, Al, are best as coordinators.
Yeah, we've seen that. Like Marty Mornhinweg, for example.
It's kind of the Peter principle kind of a thing. But I know that's easy for me to say from afar and say, just be a coordinator because that's what you're really good at.
Right.
Because it's very tempting for these guys to want to be the guy, to want to be the head coach. There's a lot more money in it. There's a lot more stature.
But then look what's going on in Denver, for example.
Yeah.
Right. that team has fallen off a cliff. With a promoted coordinator running the team right now.
And I suppose, if you go to, here's the one thing that is good about it, though, if you're a coordinator, is typically, what is nice about it is that if you're a coordinator and become a head coach and fail, very oftentimes you will still get another coordinator's job. You're not. It doesn't necessarily kill your career.
We saw it with Mornhinweg and Jim Schwartz.
Right. It doesn't turn you into some sort of damaged goods or a pariah or, people. A lot of
Once
guys.
You're in when it comes to the NFL. It feels like.
So Schwartz is a good example, and guys will be okay. They tried it, didn't work. They go. It happens a lot. Yeah. So that's what's nice if you're a coach. Not that you're guaranteed a coordinator's job if things don't work out, but that's sometimes where people might feel like that's where you're best at.
Yeah.
Because there's a big difference between being a coordinator and being the head coach. Clearly, right. There's no question about that. So we'll see. Ben Johnson's, very young. He's got a lot of time to even consider making that move. But don't forget, there was a time when Aaron Glenn was looked at as being a head coaching candidate.
Yeah.
And a lot of that went down the tubes earlier in the year. Now they're starting to talk about him again because the defense is playing better. So, these things go in, like a roller coaster. Bottom line is what's going to get you a head coaching job, though, Al, is how the teams that hire you or feel like you're going to be able to handle the players.
Right.
How do you think? How do we feel this person? He was a great offensive coordinator, very young, very bright. But how do we feel like he'll, work with the locker room, the entire locker room? And I know it's a crapshoot because you can have all the interviews in the world and you really won't necessarily know. But that's really where it's all at. It's relationships with players, and I know that's important in all coaching jobs, whether it's a position coach or a coordinator or a head coach.
Yep.
Relationships with players is always important, but it's not necessarily the brilliance you may show on Sundays as a coordinator as much as what you show the powers that be in those interviews.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you bring up the player relationships. How we've seen it over the last three regimes where reportedly the players would have run through a wall for Jim Campbell. they couldn't wait for Matt Patricia to get fired because he was such a miserable son of a bitch. And now Dan Campbell is emotionally or outwardly is the complete polar opposite of Mr. Stoic, Mr. Decorum, Jim Caldwell.
Right.
But it really looks like once again the team would run through a wall for the guy, and especially in this league where the head coach in a lot of ways is a CEO. He's not. Obviously there's reported that Campbell is a pretty good X's and O's guy. But that's not the main part of the job when it comes to being a head coach. That's really why you have coordinators to really, you're obviously the buck stops with you, but the daily X's and O's creative stuff is really put in the hands of the coordinators, and the CEO just implements everything as the CEO and has to make sure the locker room runs smoothly and all that kind of fun stuff. And after that almost 3 years of Quinn Tricia, it is very refreshing to see a very likable team again. For that Patricia era, that was a very unlikable team for numerous reasons. Just between, obviously, Matt Patricia was a miserable son of a bitch, and Bob Quinn never spoke to the media, never did, you never knew what the hell he was thinking. And it seemed like there was almost weekly stuff coming out of the locker room in a very negative light in both the players and the coaching staff. And now, even when things were going bad early in the season, there was very little of that. And I will also give the Campbell's credit. When he sees something isn't working, he's not afraid to make a change, as he did with Aubrey Pleasant about 6 weeks ago when he fired his defensive backs coach. And it really seems to have played a part in turning around the defense. Don't ask me how or why. I'm not an X's and O's guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, whether there needed to be a change in how things are being implemented, if there was a messaging thing, who knows? Firing Aubrey Pleasant, who did land on his feet. I believe he's working with Green Bay now. I think he's an assistant coach there.
Yeah.
That whatever it is Campbell saw, it wasn't working. Much like he did with the offensive coordinator last year, when same thing happened halfway through the year, saw it wasn't working, made a change, and things got better. It's happened again this year, and I got to give Campbell credit for that. And that if he sees something not working, he makes a change. And that got to be hard to do because Campbell hired the guy, interviewed the guy, hired the guy, and then you have to fire him. That's not an easy thing to do at no matter what job, no matter what level. And I'll give him credit for that he admitted there was something going on there, needed to change, and he made a change. So that's a hard thing to do, and we've seen other teams in town not do that. I mean, you could make an argument that the Tigers needed to make some coaching changes last year and didn't, and they waited till the end of the season. So,
well, I mean, at the time when they let Pleasant go,
yeah,
it was kind of looked at as like Pleasant was the sacrificial lamb.
Yep.
And everybody was really calling for Aaron Glenn's head at that time.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, geez, if anybody's on the hot seat, it should be.
Well, it was kind of weird, though, because even during the press conference, I believe he said, Campbell said, I wanted them to play press defense.
Yeah.
And press defense wasn't being played by the defensive backs. And so who knows? We'll probably never know what exactly went down there, but something happened. And miscommunication or who knows? But yeah, it's it's a shame it happened. But again, I have to give Campbell credit for making a change. And it felt different than, remember when Wayne Fonts, whenever he got in the hot seat, he'd fire a coordinator. He seemed to go through a coordinator every year and a half or so. At least this feels a little different than Wayne Fonts saying, "Well, I need to keep my job. I'm going to fire a coordinator," which happened all the time with him. But at least this does feel a little bit different.
Well, I suppose that when you make changes like that during the season, they're not easy decisions to make.
No.
By the head coach, because these are guys that you've brought in, you've hired. You haven't inherited them. These are guys that you brought in. You've bonded with them, and I know that it wasn't easy, I'm sure, for Campbell to do that.
And for the players as well.
Yeah. But the thing that overall, though, that Al, that I think is impressive about the team is the discipline. I'm
Yeah.
not seeing a lot of penalties. I'm not
Yeah, you're
seeing a
right.
lot of
Yeah.
after the whistle penalties. I'm not seeing a lot of. I know Okuda got called for one last week, which I thought was a little bit ticky tack because I thought it was more of an. I mean, it wasn't a really rough out of bounds
Yeah.
hit, but I mean, it was an out of bounds hit, but.
Right.
Well, I don't think it was a lack of discipline. I think it was just one of those things where Campbell, where Okuda couldn't stop himself.
It wasn't egregious, in other words.
Right.
Yeah.
But the flags against them have not really been all that much, nor have they been drive killers or drive sustainers.
Right.
I mean, they've been kind of a holding penalty here and there. But I'm not seeing roughing the passer. I'm not seeing. Like I said, a lot of. I'm not seeing dead ball
like
fouls.
I think the only one I can think of was a taunting call after the after the fake punt last Sunday. But the Lions overcame it as well. They still went down and scored a touchdown on a play.
Yeah.
But that's those, as you said, though, those incidents seem to be fewer and farther between as the season has been going on, or even from last year. I think they're just, and I think you make the same argument that Dan Campbell's become a little more disciplined as well. He's starting to learn. He seems to be learning from his mistakes. He's still an aggressive coach. I'd like that he's aggressive, but he seems to be a little bit more judicious in when he decides to make these calls. I mean, that like the fake punt, that was a risky ass call. They're around their own 30-yard line, about the 30-yard, their own 30-yard line in the third quarter. That's a risky ass play, but apparently they said they saw this in the film. They said if we saw that specific lineup, we're going to do the fake punt. They did, and it went for 42 yards. So I mean, that's again, I like the aggressive-ness, and it's working right now. There are times though when that's going to come to bite him in the ass, as we've seen earlier this year. But I guess when you play like, when you're a riverboat gambler, sometimes you lose those gambles. I guess we have to take that into effect. But I think a lot of this is, I think the sound that the team is playing better, he doesn't have to take as many risks to keep possessions, to steal possessions, as they would say. There's there's times I'm sure in like the Seattle game or the Philly game that turned into shootouts. I mean, you had to take risks just to stay in the damn game because you couldn't stop the other team. And I think that's been a big difference, is that all of a sudden now the schedule is eased up a bit and the team seems to be gelling more. They're making stops on defense and they don't have to take as many risks on offense. And, but it's still refreshing. I still approve of the aggressiveness. I just like that he is being a little more judicious in how he's going about it. And I guess a lot of it is because the team's playing better.
Well, wins will kind of mask everything. One thing that I guess you got to give Aaron Glenn some credit for is I still don't think they're all that talented defensively, especially.
And they're playing a lot of rookies.
But somehow I'm not sure if this is Glenn's scheming or what. I don't know what it is, but I think he's been able to kind of mask a lot of the team's deficiencies. Somehow they're only giving up about 20 points a game during this 5-1 stretch.
Yeah.
But overall they're still 31st in the league in points allowed because they had such a bad start.
Yeah.
So you can't overcome that. But this is not a defense, Al, where I don't think you look at them right now and look at that point, that 31st out of 32, and say, well, they're a 31st ranked defense.
Yeah.
I think they're playing a lot better than that over the last 6 weeks, and the big plays that they've made on offense versus the ones they've been giving up on defense is very lopsided.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It's and I guess that's the thing. We have to kind of, it's like two different seasons or two different teams the way this year is gone. There's the team that went 1-6, and now there's a team that's gone 5-1. And it really is like two different teams. And what I found interesting, there's a lot of parallels, Greg, to the Wayne Fonts here, specifically the 95 season, where I believe the Lions won their last, 7 games and won like 9 and 10, and to bum rush the playoffs, so to speak. Because I know Wayne Fonts if they didn't make the playoffs that year, he was going to get fired. I think 94 was almost the same thing. But in 95, it got ridiculous where they won like I said, I think 9 to 10 to make it to the playoffs and win 10 games. And this is very similar because I believe that team, I think, was 2-5, I believe, or 2-6. And this team's 1-6. And that Wayne Font's team just went on an absolute tear, made the playoffs. I then got curb stomped by Philly, and of all people, Rodney Peete under center. But there are some parallels between that team and this team, at least how they've turned the season around, how things are going. But again, to go to the playoffs, it's still a long shot. And I think some people are starting to kind of forget that. I mean, right now, their odds, they have to go, if they finish 3-1, they still only have a 35-40% chance of making the playoffs. They have to pretty much win out and get a little bit of help. They got to get to 10 wins. If they get to 10 wins, that's winning out. They should make the playoffs. Anything other than that, then it's a flip of the coin. You need a lot of help, and even if you get that help, you still might not make the playoffs. It's still a long shot. But let me ask you this, though, Greg. They are playing better, and asking a team to win out, and win 9 of 10 games or whatever it would end up being, that is an outlier. You can't expect that every year. That's magical, so to speak. But do you think? I know you're more of a cynic of the Lions than even I am. Do you think the foundation is being laid this season, especially now when you look at the draft, where I think they have like 5 or 6 top 100 picks, and the Rams pick is looking better and better. I think it's number 4 right now. Is this a playoffs or bust next year?
Well, they certainly have the offense to be a playoff team. What they don't have is the defense still. And they need a lot of help defensively. They need more playmakers. They need a better secondary. They need a better back 7. And that's where I hope Brad Holmes's emphasis will be. He's got another bunch of draft picks again next year coming up. I think I read they've got 5 of the first 75.
Yeah, something crazy. Like, and if you play your cards right, that's 5 starters. It should be 5 starters.
So I would hope that he puts an emphasis on defense.
Well, let me ask you this: since we've last talked, when we last talked, Jared Goff had started the season okay, then he went into a funk, and I think he was just in that funk when we last talked. Since we last talked, he's been like a top 5 quarterback. It looks like he really, really is in simpatico with Ben Johnson. Do you take a quarterback with that Rams pick, even if Goff is playing well, and his contract for the next 2 years is not cheap, but it's reasonable. It's market rate at $30 million a year. Do you take a quarterback if say Stroud or Young falls to you?
No. First of all, I was not
the Goff bandwagon, but you think he's good enough?
Yeah, I don't think quarterback is the problem right now. Okay, Goff's young. He's not. I mean, he's not.
Yeah, 28.
He's not 35. Okay, and you mentioned the price tag is reasonable. He's been playing at a very high level, but my thing really just boils down to that's not where the help is needed.
You're on the draft defense bandwagon then.
Draft defense bandwagon, and the other thing too, Al, is I wasn't very impressed with Stroud.
Yeah.
When Michigan played, I know it's hard to just judge a kid on one game. I get it, but that was a big game against Michigan, and I thought Stroud came up very small, frankly.
Yeah.
I was not impressed by him whatsoever. And again, I don't watch Ohio State, so I don't know.
Right.
I'm sure he's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but what I saw against Michigan just didn't impress me. And it certainly wasn't enough where I'd say, oh, yeah, take that guy, if he's in the top 5 and with that Rams pick or whatever. No. I think you're right. You may as well ride it with Goff. This is funny for me to say because I've been telling the Lions to draft. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't draft a quarterback at all.
Maybe
later on.
They have to that quarterback room outside of Goff.
Because like most NFL teams, if the Lions' starting quarterback goes down, they're screwed. That's a lot, which is a lot of teams in the NFL. But the Lions particularly, they don't have a backup quarterback.
Right.
Philippines. So Goff, is fine for right now. We'll see what happens in a couple of years when his contract's up, whether they'll extend him. And hey, if Goff ends up being the Lions quarterback for the next 5 to 7 years, okay. Yeah. I mean, I think he can be. I think what's helping him though, Al, is what's showing through to be the strength of the team that we all knew was the strength of the team.
Right.
And that's the offensive line. The offensive line has been, we suspected, could be one of the better ones in football, and they are. I mean, I really believe that. I think that Goff has been incredibly helped by his protection.
Yeah, he looks when he has a clean pocket, he's an elite quarterback.
And not only that, but he's actually kind of impressing me with his feet.
Yeah,
he's more elusive than I thought. I think when a quarterback is more confident, their decision making is better, and they kind of feed off each other. You gain more confidence off of good decision making, and the good decision making gives you more confidence. And part of that decision making, of course, is knowing when to run, when to escape, when to and I'm not seeing him making wrong decisions when it comes to should he have run. Right. Should he have stayed in the pocket? Should he have made the throw?
Right.
Should he have thrown it out of bounds? But I'm not seeing a lot of those head scratching decisions by him.
Yeah, that he's not the same quarterback we saw.
So I think
when he was throwing the ball out of bounds on third down. Yeah.
I think what you're seeing is a guy that's kind of coming into his own, who's feeling it right now.
Yeah.
Who's got a good offensive line, who's got a pretty good running attack, by the way.
Yeah.
And good receivers. And the receivers, Al, are not dropping footballs. Yep. The only guys that are really dropping footballs are the running back. The guys, who's the one guy who was always dropping passes?
Swift?
Not Swift. He's a white guy.
The third stringer. I think.
Maybe not white guy. Maybe he's not white guy.
Not Tom Williams.
No. I think he's a fullback.
And I know who you're talking about. Yeah, but
he's dropped like three. I think he's dropped passes in the last 3 games in a row.
Right.
He's dropped passes.
But overall, they've been pretty. The receiving.
The receivers have been sure-handed. They've been sure-handed, and
Amon-Ra St. Brown is become one of the best wide receivers in the league.
He made a catch. St. Brown made a catch against the Vikings. I couldn't believe he made. Goff, it was right at the goal line. Goff threw a pass that I didn't think was even going to get to St. Brown.
Yeah.
And St. Brown caught it kind of awkwardly and was hit at the same time. And I thought, well, he's going to drop it. I mean, you can't hold on to this. And he did. I was like, oh, my God. I think the ball might have even been tipped before it got to St. Brown. It was an incredible hand-eye coordination play.
Yeah.
So the receivers are catching the football. Everything's really humming right now offensively. So I don't think if it's not broke, don't fix it. I don't think you go for a quarterback in the draft. I really don't.
Right.
At least not that high.
Yeah, and that's what when I saw Todd McShay mock his first mock draft year of the season came out yesterday, and he had the Lions taking Stroud. And did you watch Ohio State versus Michigan? And have you watched the Lions at all? Because I think the best description I heard about Goff is you won't win because of him, but you can win with him if he's got the right stuff around him. And it's looking like the Lions have the right stuff around him. Like I said, when Goff was at his best with the Rams, he had Todd Gurley, who was, was an all-pro running back at the time, and he had a decent offensive line, and he had games where he went toe-to-toe with Mahomes of all people. He had that 500-yard game. Was it? I think on Monday Night Football. Where he damn near outplayed Patrick Mahomes, and he's starting to look like that quarterback again. He doesn't need to throw the ball quite like that for the Lions to be successful. They have a pretty good ground game, and and as you said, he's got a couple receivers he obviously has immense trust in, specifically, as you said, St. Brown. And now with Williams finally coming off the IR, and that was another one where I just burst out laughing, where his first NFL catch is a 50-yard touchdown catch. Where there's in our broken coverage, and there's no Viking around him for 15 yards. It was absolutely hilarious. And even I think Goff said all he had to do was throw an arm punt to him. That's why he just says, I just wanted to make sure the ball got to him. He was so wide open. Didn't need to hit him in stride. He just had to get it there, and he was going to score. But it's just refreshing to see things going right for this franchise after so many years of bad things happening to a fan base that deserves much, much more.
Well, you and I can disagree on whether the fan base deserves much more. But I will say this: You mentioned Fonts, and I wrote a piece about him a few weeks ago, and I'm going to read this statistic to you, which this kind of verifies what you were talking about.
Yeah.
From 1989 to 1995, Wayne Fonts' Lions teams in the month of December were 21-7.
Oh.
21-7.
Yeah.
From 89 to 95 in December. And a lot of those games, they needed every single one of those victories to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We had one of those late. You're right. They kicked it into another gear after Thanksgiving. But what it was Wayne eased up on the team. He had very light practices. He didn't even have them in pads, I don't think, much after.
In a way, he was ahead of his time with that, because that's the NFL. Right. That's the NFL as a whole nowadays.
Yeah, he did not have them in pads hardly at all after Thanksgiving, and he kept them fresh, and that translated into victories. They were 21 and you can't deny it. It was 21-7.
Yeah.
You know, 3/4 they were a 750 team in December, for God's sakes. And a lot of times, and every one of those victories just about was needed for them to sneak into the playoffs. I remember Chris Berman used to call him Fonts. What did he call him? Because he was always Rasputin.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
Every time the Lions would be on the
first Lions, yes.
every time the Lions were, and Wayne was on the verge of maybe getting fired. And I remember Brett Perryman said, I think it was Perryman said, somebody asked him about this whole late season thing, and Perryman said, well, we used to bitch about Wayne a little bit at the beginning of the year, but then we thought, and when we were playing bad and we were losing football games, we were like, wait a minute, time out. If we keep losing, Wayne's going to get fired, and we don't know. We like Wayne. We don't know what we're going to get if they get rid of Wayne. So a lot of times we played these games because we were scared to death that he was going to get fired. So they played scared, and they won 21. They went 21-7. So they were always afraid of Wayne. They didn't want Wayne to get fired either, because I talked to Ron Rice one time, and I said, we went to Eastern, and I said, Ron, Wayne was a player's coach, was he? So, we loved Wayne. Oh my God, did we love him? You know, and we were sad to see him get fired. I mean, but eventually Rasputin finally did get fired. But I mean,
and he was replaced by an authoritarian,
military man, essentially.
Yeah, military man. Yeah, exactly. And Bobby Ross. Yeah, exactly. Again, there's that. Teams always zig after zagging. You know, they go from players coach to hard ass, and we've seen it with the Lions as well. You know, and over the last 3 regimes, you know, players coach, hard ass players coach, and it seems to me it makes far more sense to have a players coach in a league that's dominated by players, unless you're an absolute genius X's and O's guy. And those guys are, you know, the Belichicks are harder and harder to find. So but that's hilarious. You know, Rasputin. I haven't thought of Rasputin being associated with Wayne Fonts in years, and that is true, because it would always come up during NFL primetime.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! All right.
Or Berman would call him Nanook of the North, because he would always.
Oh yeah, the parka. Yeah. Oh my God, he looked like Fred fucking Flintstone. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But hard to believe though that he's the gold standard. For people our age when it comes to Lions coaches. You know, but he made the playoffs, got him one playoff win, got him to a championship game, and no one else can say that, going back to Buddy Parker. So God, I just hope we have a fun end of the season. Even if they don't make the playoffs, like I said, still a long shot. They're playing meaningful games, and even if they don't end up favored against the Jets, they're going to be favored in the last 3 games, even on the road, that the 2 of those games are going to be. And they could very easily win 9 games. Even if they miss the playoffs, you would have to consider the season a success. It's considering, if it continues, on this path, because things could go off the rails in a second. Goff could get hurt. I shouldn't even be jinxing them, but, Goff could get hurt. Shit can happen, But, and the Lions did kind of do the same thing last year, where didn't they finish the season like 3-3? And Goff looked a hell of a lot better. So, you know, the jury's out. It's encouraging, but like we are so jaded. We've been through the ringer of this franchise for 50 years that I'm not saying same old Lions, but I'm not going to rule it out just yet. So, all right. With that, how about the other team that's making news in this town, Greg? And that would be the Tigers. I don't know if it's good or bad. It just is when it comes to where this team finds themselves this offseason, especially when we're seeing some of the absolute bonkers money that's being thrown around out there right now. No, you see guys getting 11, 12, 13-year contracts for 33 for $350 million. And the Lions. The Tigers, well, looks like they're rebuilding the rebuild. Or as I put in the show notes, Scott Harris is trying to say we need to rebuild the rebuild without saying the word rebuild. And I guess what he first kind of made news when he mentioned is that the Tigers are planning to, quote, earmark at-bats and innings for young players. As he said, the one thing we won't waver on is we're going to invest in our young players. We are going to earmark at-bats and innings for our young players. One of our most valuable resources in this organization is opportunity at the major league level. We're going to redistribute at-bats that we created over the last month because they just cut like 5 or 6 roster players, the Castros and the Candelario, Reyes. That's a lot of at-bats right there. And we want to give those at-bats to the young players that have a chance to be here for a long time. That would be, the Torkelsons and the Greens and so on. But I hear this, and it's understandable, Greg, but I'm already dreading next season because it really looks like it's going to be bad. Unless, some of these young players just absolutely, go bonkers and become impact players in their first and second year, but which rarely happens. It's going to be a bad year, especially when he's already saying we're going to throw the young guys out there, and he's mentioned they're not going to. It doesn't look like they're going to spend any kind of serious money in free agency, and the only trade they've made so far, which we'll talk about, is for a prospect, a decent-looking prospect, but he wasn't anywhere near the top prospect in the Braves system. So I'm not looking forward to next year, Greg. I have a feeling it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, here's where perspective comes into play because, yes, it's like the Red Wings. Okay, when Steve Yzerman came in to be the GM in 2019, everybody knew that even though they were happy as hell to have Steve Yzerman come back home, they knew in their heart that the team was still bad. But they had a guy, Yzerman, who had a history of being the architect of a Stanley Cup contending and eventually Stanley Cup winning team in Tampa, and they had a lot of faith in him. And so, even though they knew the team was bad and would continue to be bad for the short term, they were okay with that because they felt like they had somebody at the wheel now who they trusted.
Right.
Same thing here. Now, Scott Harris is not, obviously doesn't have the Steve Yzerman cash in terms of the connection with the city and so forth, but he I think he's very well respected as being of what he's already accomplished, and he's still young and so forth. So they look at him, and I wrote a piece about Harris too a couple weeks ago. They look at him and they look at Al Avila. And I ran some quotes in my piece that came from Harris, and just reading them, you don't even have to hear them, just reading them with your eyes.
Yeah.
Sounds smarter than Al Avila. I mean, sounds, that's probably not the really nice thing to say, but sounds more like he's got a plan that's more sharp and together than Al Avila.
He sounds a lot more like Dave Dombrowski. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, so the fans will agree with you.
Because we're going to earmark at bats and innings. That sounds right out of the Dave Dombrowski type of when he's talking.
Fresh, it's fresh talk. It's fresh. It's refreshing too, frankly.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of talk that winning organizations say. That Harris is using the same kind of nomenclature and the same verbiage that winning organizations use. And I
Which
think
he came from. Yeah.
Right. So I think that the fans agree with you. Yes, they're going to be bad. I don't think anybody's delusional to think they're not. But again, just like Eisman with the Red Wings, okay, we're going to be bad. Our team's going to be bad, but we're going to be bad and have a plan at the same time.
Yeah.
And we're going to be attacking things in a different way. And I think that a lot of what I think Harris got a big boost, frankly, Al, when he got rid of a lot of players from the Victor Reyes of the world and the Castros,
which I have no issues with. It was about time to debate on a lot of the of that era prospects.
These 4A guys, let's face it, 4A guys who, frankly, I'm tired of seeing around here. I'm tired of the Castros. I'm tired of Victor Reyes.
Yeah, it was time to get guys like Daz Cameron go, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard the Yankees, those down years the Yankees had from the mid 60s to the early to mid 70s are known in New York as the Horace Clarke years. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Which I always felt bad for Horace Clarke, because Horace Clarke was not really a bad ball player, but Bobby Mercer was there. They never called the Bobby Mercer years, but regardless, Horace Clarke was used as like the poster boy. Or he to them, the Yankees fans, Horace Clarke represented that era of Yankee baseball, which was losing, for whatever reason. These Castros, Reyes, Cameron, and I think there's a couple other ones too.
It was the Castros, obviously Candelario, Reyes.
Right. These guys represented
they took,
losing.
Cameron off the roster, a few other guys. Yeah.
They represented losing. Okay. And I think that Harris got I think he was, and I know he didn't make those moves to get praise, but from the fans, but I think the fans did feel better about Harris when he made those, when he got rid of those guys.
Yeah.
Because, they were just around for too long. They were zero WAR players at best.
Yeah.
And, he needed the roster spots and so forth. Now Harris is not setting the world on fire right now in the off season. Okay. I will grant you that. But again, you just get the feeling that somebody's at the helm now. And that's why the Pistons have faith in Troy Weaver for the most part, Pistons fans. Lions fans have faith for the most part in Brad Holmes. Red Wings fans have faith for the most part in Steve Eisman. I think the fans are okay with some more losing if they feel like there's a plan. If there's some guy in there now who knows the scoop. And I don't think anybody ever really thought that Al Avila really was cut from that cloth of being a young progressive. He was an old school, physically old too, guy who just didn't match up. You look at all the GMs around baseball who are of winning teams. Hardly any of them are run by older dudes. Yeah. I mean, they're all guys in the 30s and 40s. I mean, that's just the way it is now. I mean, young, progressive, sharp-minded executives are what teams are hiring now. They're not hiring 60-year-old guys who've been with the organization for 20 years just to give them a way to say thank you. They're
looking for guys to know how to use a spreadsheet rather than a radar.
Yeah.
Be you like it or you don't. That's where the baseball's gone. It's gone very analytical. It's gone very numbers oriented. It's not so much seat of the pants type stuff anymore. And I'm with you. I completely agree that it was time to cut bait on the guys they let go. I have no issue with it at all whatsoever. But I guess the issue is now, I think that's what where fans are kind of concerned or impatient or kind of worried about what's next, because they don't have a third baseman, period.
Right.
They don't have a right-hand hitting outfielder. The top four outfielders are all lefties. And a couple of those outfielders are raw and young and there's a lot of question marks out there, but they're all left-handed hitting. And you have a second baseman who was the worst offensive player in baseball last year. And then you have a first baseman who, even though his number one draft status, he was one of the worst offensive players in baseball last year as well. And then catcher, you have Eric Haas, who is a useful player, but he's not an everyday player. And you have Jake Rogers, who's missed the last year and a half due to Tommy John surgery and still hasn't proven if he can hit. So I think pitching wise, which we'll touch on because the only significant moves he's made so far, at least at the big league level, is on pitching. Offensively, this team looks scary bad. And obviously, I'm sure, and Harris realizes this, and he knows he got to do something. But I'm sure fans are going to be our concern is like, how are you going to plug all these holes? And the thing is, they probably aren't. There's no way you can plug all these holes in one offseason, especially if you're not throwing around, $200 million contracts or more for guys. And even then, some of those guys would be risks anyway. So, it's there are some gaping roster holes right now, and it's going to take either trades or it's going to have to come from within the organization, and that's that has to be like, oh my goodness, what the hell are they going to do?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, just to field a team, I understand that. Just to field a team is going to be a challenge. That's for sure. Yeah, it's going to be rough. There's no question about it. And I know the fans don't want to hear that, but they know it. I mean, they know it. They know that there's more pain on the horizon, and they know it. I mean, they're not. But again, and they probably stuck with Al Avila too long. I get all that, but that's all water under the bridge. You can't do anything about that now.
Mm-hmm.
He's finally gone, and they finally have somebody in there who is all these things that Al Avila wasn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all it takes for the fans to say, you know what? I know it's gonna be rough, but thank goodness we don't have Al Avila anymore, because the fire Al Avila train was long.
And he was here a couple years too long, and here we are. And at the very end, I still can't believe how many times he brought up Daz Cameron, how many times he brought up Victor Reyes. It was like, sooner or later, you know what these guys are. And obviously Harris has finally said, yeah, we know what these guys are. And they just said it's 4A play. And if these guys are 4A players, and when you look at their numbers, these are guys who over 3-4 years put up like 1 WAR, 2 WAR. You should be able to get that same production out of someone from AAA. Be it Ryan Kreider or Zach Short or Kerry Carpenter or someone like that. So I can understand those are probably the type of players we're going to see getting at bats this year. And if you look at the numbers, they'll probably put up similar numbers, and you hope one of them ends up being better than that.
And those players, Al, by the way, may not necessarily be the ones that will be in position when the Tigers are making a run anyway. I mean, those guys that you just mentioned may not necessarily be
they could be the next Tom Verizon.
They might just be more placeholders until Harris continues to revamp the roster. But throughout the years we've seen the Will Rhymeses of the world, Scotty Sizemore, on and on and on with guys that just don't represent anything.
It kind of reminds me of that wave we saw in the mid 70s, the guys who came up before the 84 core. That's what that was me and the Verizon crack. And who else was there? There was a couple other guys that came up during that time frame, and they ended up being, nothing. It's nothing special. And they hung around for 2 or 3 years, and either ended up being cut or traded or whatever. And then the next wave came up, and hopefully that's what's going to happen here. And speaking of
the Leon Robertses of the world.
And that's who I was trying to think of. Leon Roberts. Yes, he was a right fielder, if I remember right. Yeah. And the only one of that group that turned out to be a real ball player was Steve Kemp, and he got traded anyway. So yeah. But speaking of the next generation, at least what we're hoping is last day of the winter meetings, Harris made his first significant trade. And he sent right-handed relief pitcher, former closer of the future, Joe Jimenez, in cash to the Atlanta Braves for 22-year-old right-hand hitting corner outfielder, third baseman Justin Henry Malloy. And they threw in a 26-year-old left-hand relief pitcher, Jake Higginbotham. But Malloy is the centerpiece of the deal. Over 3 levels, he played at, I believe, high A, double A, and triple A last year. And he was pretty consistent at all 3 levels. ultimately his minor league numbers were he slashed 289, 408 on base percentage. He slugged 454, 862 OPS, 17 homers, 81 RBI, and he fits the Harris quote unquote dominate the strike zone mold, as he is a high walk rate, low chase rate player. In other words, he walks well as the on base percentage goes. He had a 408 on base percentage, which when on the Tigers last year seemed to be nothing but a bunch of guys who were in the 280, 290 range. Obviously, he's being a right-handed bat. They desperately need a right-handed outfield bat, and they desperately need a third baseman. Maybe Malloy could fix one of those holes, even though he's not an elite defender by any means. He's probably average at best. But one thing to keep in mind with this deal as well is that I believe, Jimenez is going to be a free agent after this year, and Malloy is under team control to 2029. That's if he makes it to the team this year. So, but once again, Greg, you know what we always say on this podcast: the team that gets the major league player almost always wins the trade. So I hope this is probably the first. This is probably someone Harris had on his radar and was targeting, and there was reports about this trade saying that the Braves were trying to get Jimenez at the last trade deadline, but couldn't come to an agreement. So this is the player they wanted, and apparently Harris wanted Malloy. This was his target. So I guess this is going to be the first. He'll be the poster boy for the dominate the strike zone ball player he's looking
for. I'm looking at the Tigers on base percentage numbers from last.
It's scary, year. Isn't it?
They look like batting averages.
Yes.
And they honest to God look like batting. I'm going to read some of these. I'm not even going to attach them to any names.
Right.
287, 285, 239. These are on-base percentages. 278, 272, 289, 321, 289, 305, 300. Their team on-base percentage as a team was 286 as a team.
That's awful.
Their team OPS was 632.
Yep.
They scored 557 runs, which is about 3.5 a game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work to be done here, obviously offensively, but this on base percentage thing, and I've warmed up to on base percentage over the years as I've gotten older.
Mm-hmm.
Even I know
that
an on base percentage of under 300. They have that many guys on a team.
Yeah.
Have an on base percentage of less than 300 is ridiculous.
Yep.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I can put up with a lower on base percentage if these players are doing something else valuable, like hitting home runs. And they didn't do that either.
No, they didn't do that either.
So yeah, and about the only a couple of guys you could argue that wasn't Baez the guy who was getting paid $20-25 million a year? His on base percentage was around 290, I believe, 280.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Right.
No, and people like, he played better in the second half. That's still a horrible year. Right. And it's shameful how bad that offense was last year. And specifically, it was a lineup full of guys that struck out, didn't walk, weren't patient, and didn't hit the ball hard. And that's what always got me there about this fan base had a contingent of hitting Harold Castro fans. Well, he hits 290. Yeah, but he doesn't hit for power. He doesn't walk, and he can't play defense very well. That's the most unimpactful 290 you'll ever see. Give me a guy who hits 250 but gives you 30 bombs, or give me a guy who hits 250 but walks and gets out of the 350 rate. That's why a guy like Alex Avila, people ragged on Avila. Oh, he only hit 219. Yeah, but his on base percentage was 350. The guy got on base. And that's what it's about in today's game. Guys got to get on base, and the Tigers just didn't get on base. Hopefully, Malloy lives up to the billing that he's supposedly close to being a major league ready ball player. And hopefully maybe he is the guy this is the kind of guy they're going to be modeling, the kind of player they're going to be modeling after, they're going to be going after. But that's the other thing, how we're talking about the Giants, is that Harris spent a long time with the Giants, and they constantly churned the bottom of the 40-man roster. They were constantly, we've already seen it this year, or they bring guys onto the 40-man roster for a few weeks and they'd cut them loose because they found someone they liked better. And I think we're probably going to see that a lot this year with the Tigers. They're going to be churning the bottom of the roster. We're going to be seeing a lot of guys going up and down and being picked up and being waived and being picked off waivers and so on and so forth. But that's how the Giants got a guy like Mike Yastrzemski, who turned out to be a very valuable player for them. And I'm sure that's the sort of thing we're probably going to be seeing this year. I would say this as a Tigers fan: don't get too accustomed to anybody, maybe except Ryan Green.
Yeah. I mean, Tucker Barnhart, for example, Avila, to me, I think what sunk him ultimately, Avila, was he just didn't win enough trades. He didn't win enough trades. He didn't win enough acquisitions. He didn't win enough free agents.
And we've talked before, he was so risk averse. In the winter trade, sometimes you got to take a risk.
Some of the guys that they just, my God, they were just so bad. And now you can make a case that they were historically bad. Mm-hmm. They were career worse for whatever reason in Detroit. Barnhart was one of them. But Scope, he extended Scope, and Scope went down the tubes.
Yep. Robbie Grossman. Yep.
But yeah, it was really bad. But we'll. It's hard to imagine that it could be worse than it was last year. So hopefully,
well, let's talk a little bit about the pitching, because that's where they have made a couple moves, and they picked up 2 free agent starting pitchers. First off, they brought back Matthew Boyd, a 1-year, $10 million deal. Boyd kind of bounced around last year after the Tigers non-tendered him. He ended up being signed by the Giants, but he was still injured, recovering from that flexor tendon surgery. He ended up being traded to Seattle, where he pitched out of the bullpen through 13 innings and put a 1.35 ERA. Boyd, from what I've read, Boyd insists on being a starter. He does not want to pitch out of the bullpen. And when I first saw this deal, Greg, I thought, $10 million for Matthew Boyd? Really? And then I saw what the pitching market turned into. Like a guy like Jacob deGrom, coming off injury, 34 years old, 5 years, $137 million from the Rangers. I was like, that 1 year, $10 million doesn't sound all that bad. Hell, it makes Eduardo Rodriguez a bargain at his 5-year, $77 million deal. So, no, and obviously if Rodriguez is anywhere decent, he's going to opt out immediately because he sees what this market looks like now. But Matthew Boyd, I can understand it. The current rotation is full of injury risks, or guys are coming off of injury or are injured. So they're going to need like 8 starters. They probably will. And Boyd and the other guy they signed, Michael Verlenzen, he signed 1 year, $8.5 million, and he put a 4.24 ERA with 97 innings and 18 starts with the Angels last year. A bottom of the rotation guy. He's a 4 or 5 starter. Hell, Boyd, you can say the same thing. He's probably at best a 3, probably more like a 4. But these guys are low risk, high reward. They're not in. They need starting pitching, Greg, because right now the rotation is essentially those 2. You got Spencer Turnbull coming back from Tommy John, and then you got Rodriguez, who missed almost all last year, and Matt Manning, who missed a significant part of last year. And then you got guys like Joey Wentz, has a Tommy John in his history. Alex Faedo he has a Tommy John in his history. Bo Brisky, he got hurt and had to be shut down last year. And then Casey Mize is gone the entire year, with his Tommy John. And there's the Rule 5 guy, Mason Englert, who at least got to start the year as a starter. We'll see what happens to him. So I can understand that they need some veteran starting pitching, just because the young starting pitching is so damn volatile. And we've seen over the last couple of years that you cannot depend on the young pitchers to stay healthy. So you need veteran guys like this. I have no problems with these. They have to have some guys in the rotation that could at least put up some innings. It is what it is at this point when it comes to the Tigers and their pitching. It is what it is.
Yeah, right. Well, there's you mentioned there's a lot of question marks. You mentioned a lot of guys coming off of injury. They're going to get, hopefully they'll get Spencer Turnbull back.
That would be like almost signing a free agent if he is as good as he was before he got hurt.
But there were 12 occasions where the Tigers had position players pitching.
Yes.
12. It used to be when a position player pitched was like once a year.
Yeah.
Maybe once a year you'd see that. 12 times position players pitched for the Tigers last year. That's embarrassing. And what's even more embarrassing is their ERAs were okay. Cody Clemens pitched 7 innings, 3.86. Harold Castro pitched 4 innings, 4.5. Barnhart pitched an inning, 9.0. But yeah, the pitching, Turnbull, we hope will come back. Manning, Mize, a lot of Scooble, all these guys, hurt, Brisky. And you mentioned it. I mean, young pitchers. That's why I'm not, that's why when the Rangers signed DeGrom for all that money, it was the Rangers, right? That signed DeGrom. Are you on mute?
Yes, I am. Yeah, after spending $500 million on shortstop last year.
Yeah, I am. This whole notion of giving a starting pitcher that kind of dough, it to me is so 15 years ago, and that's old time thinking anymore. Yeah. I don't want to see anybody else, any Tigers pitcher, getting that kind of dough for that.
I say it's all about the term. Like, I have no problem with giving Justin Verlander $50 million
or something.
Yeah, 40, 50 million a year. That's what Max Scherzer got as well, both from the Mets, but only for 2-year deals. That's
they're old.
I could care less about the yearly salary. It's all about the term.
Mm-hmm.
And these teams now are, to keep the average annual value of the contract at under $30 million a year. We're seeing these 10, 12, 13-year contracts. What Carlos Correa, what do you get? 13 and 350 from the Giants, for example.
And that's after Correa. I thought Correa said he was going to resign with Minnesota. I thought that he said he liked Minnesota.
Minnesota offered $70 million less.
I thought he was going to be a one and done in Minnesota anyway.
Yeah. From what I read, the Giants offered 350. The Twins' best offer was like 280.
But the thing about these pitchers, though, Al, the reason why I'm so against giving these starters all this money is because they don't. I know you're talking about term. They don't pitch the innings anymore. 15 years ago, you gave a guy 8 years and a bunch of money because he could pitch 200 innings.
Yeah.
Now DeGrom, they get 150 innings out of him.
Yeah.
The Rangers.
You're doing good.
And for that kind of dough, I want more than 150 innings. I'm sorry. I mean, I think the money could be spent. To me, the money could be spent better elsewhere.
Yeah.
Than sinking it all in the starting pitcher. And the Rangers are not a DeGrom away from contending either. That's the other thing. But,
yeah, it's. Yeah, so actually, I'm just bringing up like the Tigers' starting staff last year, and innings pitched. Tarek Skubal led the team 117 innings. He was the race. He threw 117 innings. For example, let me bring up Eduardo Rodriguez. I know last year's an outlier for him, but over his career, the most he's ever thrown in 1 year. He has 1 year of 200 innings. The most, other than that, in his 8 years in the league, is 157. Yeah, you're right about that. These starting pitchers don't put up heavy innings anymore. They really, really don't. And yet they're being paid crazy money. And some of them do deserve it. I would have no problem throwing a Brinks truck at Verlander or Scherzer or guys like the guys who have proven to be actually outliers. They really are. I mean, that they're as effective as they are this late in their careers, but yeah, giving someone like DeGrom that contract, with DeGrom, that contract's going to look bad in 2 years, let alone 5.
Right.
That guy has proven he can't stay healthy. So, and I'm sure the Mets are more than happy. Oh, we'll take Verlander over DeGrom any day of the week. It makes and it's a much more reasonable contract. So yeah, you're right though. The money is getting nuts. It is, but I can understand. At least the deals the Tigers made, high risk, low reward, not a lot of money. I don't have a big issue with that because you need 8 starting pitchers at least in the way things are going right now. And it goes for anything. pitchers drop like flies, especially young pitchers, because they all throw hard. They all throw breaking balls from when they're 8 years old, and their arms are toast by the time they're 25 half the time. And then they have Tommy John, and they come back when they're 27, 28, like Casey Mize. That's what's got to be him. Anyway, with that, let's talk a little Red Wings before we start hitting the home stretch, Greg. A lot going on there. A lot. The Red Wings are slowing down a bit. They got off to a fast start, but injuries are starting to catch up with them. The schedule is getting a lot tougher. They're over 500 still. They're 13, 10, and 6. They're fourth in the Atlantic. They're like a bubble playoff team right now, but they have lost 4 in a row. They are 3-5-2 in their last 10. And despite having a winning overall record, they have a goal differential of -6. Injuries are piling up. Out are Tyler Bertuzzi, Jacob Vrana, Robbie Fabry, Philip Zadina. Dylan Larkin is, I guess, supposedly seeing a hand specialist after being hit with a puck on Monday. And I would not be surprised if he's out for a significant amount of time. And then last night, Philip Hronek looks like he had suffered a concussion and he left the game. Looks like he's going to be out for at least a little while. That's a lot of important players on the bench right now, and I think it's starting to catch up with the Wings. The schedule's getting tougher. Yeah. The injuries are piling up. And I think right now, the best we can ask for the of the Red Wings is they're to tread water right now because they're missing a bunch of top 6 players.
Right. And Derek Lalonde said his message has been the same, which is we're not good enough to just go out there and throw our sweaters on the ice and win. We have to bring our A game every night just to have a chance to win. Mm-hmm. He's not. I don't think he's been sucked into. When they got off to the, you mentioned the 3-5-2, so they were 10-5-4 at one point.
Right.
I think Lalonde did a good job of kind of managing expectations and not getting too carried away. He said, look, we're off to a pretty good start. The special teams have been much better. The penalty killing has been better.
That was carrying the team, really, because they were winning games with special teams, not 5-on-5.
Right. Their power play has been a lot better. But they have a problem with, you mentioned injuries, but they also have a problem with just consistent offense, and that's understandable because of you mentioned the players that are out. And the other thing we're going to talk about is the goaltending situation, which you how long do you ride Husso? Now Husso has been fantastic for the most part. How but this kid, I don't think the Red Wings went into this season thinking that Husso might have to play 55 to 60 games. I don't think they thought that.
No.
But the way it's working out with the Ned being so bad, that he might have to play 55 to 60 games for the Red Wings to contend for the playoffs. Now, then you have to ask the question: well, will Husso break down? Is that too much? He was brought in I think he was brought in to be the number one potentially, anyway, but barely number one. I don't think maybe 45 games. But he's looking like he's going to have to play almost 60, to me, 55 to 60 games, because unless Ned turns it around. And I don't know, and they brought in Hellberg now. I don't know what they're going to do for a backup goalie, for a second goalie.
Yeah, because the numbers, Nedeljkovic, he's gone off the rails. I mean, we look at the numbers. Husso has a 2.48 goals against. His save percentage is .918. The guy who was supposed to be the 1B to Husso's 1A or vice versa, Ned's goals against is over 4.09 and an 8.80 save percentage. That's not good. I don't think anybody saw that come. He was pretty good last year, not bad at all. And obviously, I think they're bringing up Hellberg. What I've read is that they feel like, considering the struggles of Nedeljkovic, they need to have a third goalie. They have room on the roster for a third goalie, and they have the salary cap room for a third goalie. So they brought up Hellberg, who played last night. He looked okay with the Griffins, but again, he really feels like he's a Grand Rapids Griffin who is being forced into a Grand Rapids Griffin level goalie who is being forced into action at the NHL level because the backup job is up for grabs. It sounds like. And you're right. They were. I'm sure they thought they would get like 30 games, 35 games each from Husso and Ned. And it's not looking like that now. You can't throw Nedeljkovic out there the way he's playing. I don't know if that means they have to send him down or if they have to just play him sparingly until they get his head right or something. Because goalies are mercurial. They're like relief pitchers. You never know what you're going to get from them from year to year.
Yeah, and the funny, but
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of hockey versus baseball, the X factor to that, Al, is that you're right about goalies being mercurial, but there's kind of a weird dynamic sometimes between how the team plays in front of one goalie versus how they play in front of another. And it seems like when a guy is really hot, like Husso, for the most part has been, the team seems to play with more confidence with a guy like that behind them. When you've got a guy that's struggling, like Nedeljkovic, I think it brings the whole team kind of tenses up. Right. Because they sense, and it's not that they don't think he's good, but they know that, but everybody knows he's struggling. Everybody knows it. And these guys, these goalies, it doesn't take much for them to lose their confidence. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, you can be riding high. Look at Vachon when the Red Wings signed Vachon. Now, he was a little old. He was 33, but he was still a pretty good goalie when the Red Wings signed him in 78. He completely lost his confidence. He just went down the tubes real fast. Now he got old. I get it. But what I'm saying is even a guy like that who had all that experience and all that, won trophies and so forth, played in Team Canada and everything else, just for whatever reason, it started off his very first game when he gave up. The Blues only had 14 shots on goal. He gave 6 goals up on 14 shots. That kind of set the tone. And so these goalies can lose their confidence really, really fast, and it's hard to get it back. And when the players know that, and sometimes you play tighter in front of a guy like that. When you've got a guy like Husso, who's been, again, for the most part, very good. There's just a different vibe on the ice. Now, my concern though with Husso, and I know he's only 27, but he's only ever played. He played 40 games last year for St. Louis. Okay. He's on pace, like I said, to play 55 to 60 games for the Red Wings. And I don't know if the jury's out if he's going to continue to play at this high level for 55 to 60 games.
Yeah, with that kind of heavy workload. Yeah, exactly.
And now it could be a good thing. It could be he's one of these guys that he loves it. He loves to play, and the more, give me all the work you can give me, and the more games I play, the better I am. It could be that way. But it could also be come March, you start to see him kind of, his play tail off a little bit. I don't know. And if the Red Wings are going to make a serious run for the playoffs, which I don't think they will, but if they do, they're going to need top flight goaltending because they still they're still challenged up front. Even when they got all their guys healthy, they still are a little bit challenged. They still are probably lacking one more really, really good scorer. Right. They don't have a 40 goal guy. They don't have a Ovechkin or, a guy like that, but they're trying to do goal scoring by committee. You got a lot of guys on the team now who are very experienced, who've won Stanley Cups, who've gone deep into the playoffs. They've been there, done that. That helps immensely. You can't overstate how much that helps a coach to look around the dressing room and see a Perron and see a Mata and see, a Sherratt and guys like that who've been around the block, because the Red Wings core haven't. Larkin's played in one playoff series. Bertuzzi hasn't played in any playoff series. A lot of the guys, obviously Seider has it. Obviously Raymond has it. Right. Now Husso has, he's played in the playoffs. So he knows what that's all about. Right. But a lot of the players that were here before Yzerman made all those moves do not have any playoff experience whatsoever. And you can't, when you come in like March, for example, every game becomes more important. When you look at every game as we're kind of as a playoff. That's their playoff. It's to try to make the playoffs. That's their playoff. Right. Well, you look around the dressing room, you see all these guys who've got loads of playoff experience behind them. They also know what that's like as well. Right. Not just what the playoffs are like, but what those late season when the games become more important, they take on more meaning. Every game is has more at stake.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have a bunch of young guys out there. You got to have, I mean, I don't care how good they are. You got to have some veterans who have been there and done that. And that was what was so successful about those Red Wings teams in the 90s and early 2000s. They had a bunch of guys who just had a lot of tread on their tire. Yes, they were old, but they also had a lot of experience.
Right.
And, so that was, invaluable when it came playoff time. When you get into a series, you get into a situation, you don't panic out there. And the Red Wings just did not have that going into this year.
Right. It's it's again, this is an encouraging year. This is like, I think the Red Wings are having the year that I think the Pistons were hoping to have. Not that they're going to make the playoffs, but they were hoping to at least be like like the Lions. They're playing important games later in the year. They're on the bubble. They're maybe would have a chance to get into the play-in, whatever. So, it's and so the rebuild is on track. It would be more on track if some of these guys would get healthy. Again, no, that is hockey as well. I mean, guys get hurt. But one thing we really should need to talk about what happened to Hronek last night, because that's kind of been a controversy with the fan base, and it's funny how the fans see it one way, but the players themselves saw it another. Where Hronek got leveled by a wild player. God, I can't remember the guy's name at this point. And it's a guy who's known as a hitter. And Hronek took a shoulder to the head. His visor cut into his nose, a lot of blood. Looked like he was concussed. He's apparently in concussion protocol right now. No penalty. It was, I don't think it was a dirty hit. It was just a very physical, badly timed hit, I guess, more way to put it. And Hronek didn't necessarily have his head down, but he was looking to make a pass. He looked away, and the minute he turned back, bam, he got hit. That was a hit. He got drilled. And I think what bothered the fan base the most, Greg, is that the Wings didn't do anything. They didn't. Yeah. There was no fight. There was no pushing, shoving. There was no one that came up to just voice their displeasure, essentially, and essentially letting the Wild do what they wanted to. And I know the game has changed. They don't drop the gloves the way they used to, and that's in the end for the better. But sometimes I would say the Wings came off after that, because it happened again later in the game, and finally. God, who was it that ended up fighting? It wasn't even. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't even really a fight. It was more like a wrestling match. But at least, and they only did that because he did it again. He drilled another wing. So it really, I know the game's changed, and I know the Wings have a reputation of always have been a skill team for a few decades at this point. But even when they were considered a skilled team, they had guys who could. If they weren't necessarily enforcers, but they could hold their own. Like, I'm not even talking Shanahan per se, but like Dylan McCarty or there were always a couple grind line, third, fourth line types who at the very least were not afraid to stick their nose in and protect players. Dylan Larkin's done it. We've seen Dylan Larkin do it a few times, where he's just said, "Screw this noise." And if he thought he got hit the wrong way, he's going to retaliate, which is refreshing to see. And it just kind of bothered me that no Wings seemed to have any urge to, I'm not asking them to get into a stick swinging match or turn into Bob Probert, but at the very least, you can't let that go. Not the way hockey's always been like that. You can't have the other team be physical and then you let it happen and not respond in kind. You just can't.
Right. Well, I mean, right. And the Red Wings said they loved Sherratt's what he did.
Yeah. Well, he shouldn't have had to wait a whole period to do it.
No, right. Now, we have to remember that hockey teams anymore, rosters are not, they don't have goons on the roster.
No.
That's a thing of the past. Okay, let's acknowledge that. There's no goons really anymore in the NHL.
Yeah.
Teams don't carry goons anymore like they used to.
Right.
So, but you still have to have guys that are willing to do that kind of thing that Sherratt did. Granted, may have come late. That okay, whatever. And you're right about somebody not maybe doing something right away, and it's not even necessarily, even if you get your butt beat on and you get involved with the guy and you lose and you kind of get roughed up a little bit, at least you've gone in there, you've tried to do something. But teams just don't have. You can't send a guy in the ice anymore like a Probert back in the day,
right?
And say, take care of that. So it's up to somebody's got to do that.
Right.
Sherratt apparently he's been saying for a long time that he's willing to do that kind of stuff, and he has been doing it a little bit. Seider's another one, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Now Seider is sneaky. He's sneaky with it. He's not a traditional. He's not. If you don't think of him in that fashion, but Seider is nasty. I mean, he really is. He's not. Yeah. He's. You watch him on the ice, and he's sneaky with his nastiness. He's not to be trifled with. Believe me.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. The Red Wings, that.
Yeah, and by the way, the player was Ryan Reeves, who was known as a tough guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that has to be addressed. And we typically think about that kind of stuff when a goalie gets hit behind the net or something.
Right.
But really, I mean, and it doesn't even have to be. If it's a clean hit.
Yeah.
Even if it's a clean hit, sometimes you got to. It doesn't really matter. It's like, well, okay, I know it was a clean hit, but
my guy got hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
So so guess what? It's kind of like baseball with the beanball wars. You would throw my guy, I throw your guy.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, the Red Wings don't have fight, but a lot of teams don't have fighters on their roster. I mean, gone are the days where you guys with 300 penalty minutes. That's long gone. I think the leader may now in any given year might have 150 to 200 minutes a year.
Right.
But you just don't have those guys anymore on the roster. Yeah. You can't afford it. No, you can't afford to have a guy that's going to play 5 minutes a game, essentially.
Yeah.
Sitting on the bench. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's the Stu Grimsons of the world are no more.
There's too many. Yeah. There's too much. The NHL is about skill now. It's about totally. Yeah. It's skill. It's not fisticuffs anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Brendan Shanahans are unicorns. They really are. Right. You're lucky if you have a guy like that who is a skilled player who can actually hold his own physically. That's those guys are harder and harder to find. As you said, because you're right, it's a skill game now. The years of being it just brings to mind Sean Connery and the Untouchables. You put one of mine in a hospital, put one of yours in the morgue. Those days have passed, both in law enforcement and in hockey, and so that's what we are now. But it just bothered me. It really did. I know it shouldn't bother me as much as it did, but no, we're old guys, and we're going back to, we're old enough to remember Gordie Howe actually playing as a wing, or at least I do anyway. I actually saw him play as a very, very, very young child, but it just. I don't know. It rubbed. I'll just say it rubbed me the wrong way that it wasn't handled right then and there. Jump the guy, take your lumps, at least show you're not going to be pushed around. Unfortunately, the Wings kind of got pushed around last night. But again, that if they had Giovanni Smith on the roster, I have a feeling he probably would have handled it. He's the kind of guy that would be the spot for him. But I don't think he's just not skilled enough to be an everyday player in the NHL. As you said, he's a guy like Giovanni Smith is a luxury in today's NHL. He really is.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, as we hit the home stretch, Craig, we want to talk on the other big news, which is essentially bad news for the Pistons, and that is Cade Cunningham's season is over really before it really got going. The prize second-year guard, the number one pick last year in the NBA. Last played on November 9th. Apparently, he's been battling a sore left shin since last year. He took a month off. He had a month of rest, and then it was decided that he would undergo season-ending surgery to repair what apparently a left shin stress fracture. As I said, this is something that has gone on for quite some time, apparently, and it really looked like it was affecting his play, because his shooting – the last game he played, he looked awful. He just looked like there was something really wrong with him, and apparently now we know. So he ends the season averaging 19.6 boards and 6 assists a game, shooting only 27% from three, which I think that plays into having the bad leg. So apparently, Greg, the tank is on for at least one more year. I mean, I think that they don't have a choice, honestly, when you don't have Cade Cunningham and your backcourt is Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes, and even though Hayes is probably proven that he is an NBA player, he's actually played pretty well, but this is a team that is just doesn't have enough talent yet. And when you lose, you suppose it. I don't know if he's there yet. At least the guy they're hoping to be the face of the franchise, the guy you build around. You don't have him. It's a lost season. So the tank is back on, it looks like. And they're not taking a purpose. It's just how it's happened. So now you have to hope for to get one of the top two picks, either be it Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson. No, was it Victor Wembanyama? They're calling a unicorn, 7'2" Euro, who can dribble, shoot from three. Essentially a better Greek freak, essentially. So and Scoot Henderson, I guess I've read that if he had been available in the same draft as Cade Cunningham, you take Scoot Henderson every time. He's supposedly that good of a point guard. But good Lord, we have looks like the Tigers are back rebuilding the rebuild, and the Pistons are having trouble getting their foundation to stay in one place or stay together. And we're going to have another long season of the Pistons. But apparently, if you're going to have a bad year, this is the year to do it because of some of the players will be able to top of the draft. But I'm going to find myself probably watching a lot more Red Wings this year than I will be the Pistons.
Well, it's a shame. I remember we had City Hall on the show. City and I exchanged texts after the news.
Yeah.
And he said, remember when I was on the show and I kind of flippantly said that the worst thing that can happen for the Pistons if Cade Cunningham breaks his leg.
So it's City's fault.
And I said, "Oh, you did say that." And I remember telling you, well, "Why did you say that?" And I said, "God, don't say that." And eventually, that's what happened. And you know what? I mean, hey, it was the right decision to get.
Because fix it for good.
Stinks. It's absolutely stinks. Now by the way, the fans seem to think, and even some of the media, kind of perplexes me. Mm-hmm. They kind of have taken this attitude of, well, I guess the Pistons are going to get Victor.
No, they'll have a 14% chance.
Yeah,
Victor.
It's not. This isn't like the old days where you got the number one pick over, by right.
Yeah,
you got to go into a lottery.
Yeah,
the three worst teams in the NBA each have a 14% chance, I think, is what it is, of getting the top pick. Okay.
Yeah.
So this notion of let's tank for Victor is a fallacy, frankly. I mean, they'll have a shot at him, of course, but they could just as easily pick third or fourth. I think the team that finishes with the worst record in the NBA is guaranteed no worse than no worse than the fourth pick?
I think it's something like that. Yeah. They can't drop a ridiculous amount, but they still drop like four.
But it's not fait accompli that if they lose 60 games, they're going to get Victor. It's not the way it works. And I even saw a couple of media people say, well, Victor, you're a Piston now. I'm like, well, I said, well, you do know that the three worst teams each have the same shot at this kid, don't you? And one of them wrote back and said, it was just a tweet, LOL. I'm like, well, you got to be more responsible for that. This was the Colton guy, the guy who was the beat writer for the news. Yeah. I said, you got to be more responsible than that. You can't just say, well, I guess the Victor's a Piston now. No.
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, he could be, yes, but it's not. So, but the bottom line is it stinks. There's no question about it. I mean, what's worse about it isn't just that he's out. Yeah. It's that now he's going to miss essentially his second season. So when he goes into his third season next year, is really his second. Let's face it. Okay, he still has only played 77 games in the NBA. Okay, still, because I think he played 65 in his rookie year.
He missed about maybe a quarter of the year last year.
So he's still only played. He hasn't even played 80 games yet in his NBA career. It would have been nice for he and Ivy to play together, but some good news here is that Killian Hayes
Yep.
has kind of emerged in Cunningham's absence as the player that a lot of people thought he could be when the Pistons drafted him in 2020. Now, people have to remember this about Hayes. His rookie year was truncated by COVID. Okay, that was the first thing.
Yeah.
He didn't really have much of a training camp to speak of. Then, so his development was kind of stunted by that, and now he's only now really getting the kind of playing time that we all thought that he might get. And then they drafted Cunningham, of course.
Right.
I mean, that took some minutes away from him. So, and the other thing that's really impressive about Hayes is that he got off to such a bad start this year that it looked like, he's a bust. What a complete waste of a draft pick he was. But now his turnaround almost took place right when Cunningham started missing games.
Right.
When Cunningham went down initially in November, and Hayes started to get more playing time. That's when everything turned around for this guy. So that's some good news, is that because he's still their best perimeter defender still, and he's still got great court vision, but his outside shooting has really improved.
Right. So he's all of a sudden he's like, 40% from three. It's like, oh hell.
He hit a dagger against the Hornets the other night.
Yeah, exactly.
That basically put that game away.
Yeah.
In overtime.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if that might be the one, if there the silver lining, I'll put it that way, of this is the silver lining of Cunningham going down, is that Killian Hayes is showing that he is going to be a legit NBA player, be it as a backup or a rotation piece. I don't think he's going to be a superstar by any means. He may not ever live up to that 7th pick overall, but he looks like he's turning into he could be a very, very useful player. And a guy like him, if you have him running your second team, that's a weapon if he continue to play like this. No, if he ends up being your backup point guard on the second team and plays like this, having a 3-guard rotation, 4-guard rotation, that's awesome. The Pistons' best years had 3 or 4 guards that could play. The Bad Boys Pistons had a 3-guard rotation. So I'm looking for the good. And Killian Hayes being the good, because it's also the bad is that it's kind of showing that that Cunningham was making Jaden Ivey better, because Ivey's stats have dropped significantly since Cunningham is no longer playing next to him.
Right.
So that's the downside, is that it's showing that Ivey isn't there yet, and he does need a good player next to him, and without him, he's being a little more exposed. But again, he's a kid. It was going to happen anyway. So hit the rookie wall or whatever. So it's a shame, and I'm going to blame City. It's his fault now. So so it's it is what it is. I hate using that term again, but the silver lining is they may get lucky in the lottery, and Killian Hayes is proving to be an NBA player. So at least there's that. But this season is lost.
Their record is 8-22, but they have won 5 of the last 12 games, and even the games they've lost have not really been blowouts. They've been really competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Casey has got this different rotation now, where he's got Sadiq Bey coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Duren, by the way, is getting more playing time than we thought, because of injuries earlier on to Noel and to
and he looks like he belongs at 18 years old. He he's still a ways away, but he had 19 rebounds last night.
Not Stewart. I'm sorry, Bagley. When Bagley and Noel were hurt at the beginning of the year, Duren was thrown in there, and he's been fantastic. I mean, he's been really, really good.
Yeah.
And so it's again. Yes, it's going to be a lot of losses. The NBA is, especially the Eastern Conference, very, very talented. But these kids I think they're getting good experience. Bogdanovich has been as advertised. He's been terrific.
Yeah.
But it stinks about Cunningham, but he still is only 21 years old. Got to remember that too.
Yeah, it's a young team that is being carried by Bojan Bojanovic, who is played out of his mind right now at 33 years old.
And Burks.
Yes, and Alec Burks, who is really. Those two are showing why you need to have veterans on your team. You can't just roll out 15 guys under 25.
Right.
You need some guys with NBA experience, and the games they have won, you could populate the feet of those two players.
There was a game, Alan. I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere out west. It was when they were on their West Coast trip, and there was about 5 minutes to go. And I can't remember where they were.
Yeah,
they won the game anyway. About 5 minutes to go, Casey pulled Ivy and Hayes.
Yeah,
pulled them both at the same time.
Yep,
and put in Corey Joseph and Burks.
Yeah,
and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I said, I wonder if is that just for a blow or is that for the rest of the game? Well, those kids sat for the rest of the game. Burks and Joseph had that veteran steadiness, and they got them through that game. I can't remember who they were playing, but they won the game. And Casey said this was a time where we needed to win the game.
Yeah,
and I wanted these guys, meaning Ivy and Hayes, to watch these veterans. Burks, I was going to put them back in. They were done. I was going to finish the game with Burks and Joseph, no matter what happened. And it turned out that both of them, especially Burks, made big shots. Played. You can just tell. Tell that they're with their body language and everything. They were just more calmer together. Now, it's not to say the Pistons would have lost that game had he left Ivy and Hayes in, but I thought that was a telling move. He said, look, we needed to win that game. Now, that's a game that it doesn't mean anything. They're not going to make the playoffs. But it was just sometimes there's a night in the NBA where you got to win. I mean, we have a chance to win this game. We're on the road. And I just don't want my young guys to self-destruct or whatever and be here's what I think Casey was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to win the game, obviously, but I think what he was trying to do was he wasn't so much that he wanted Burks and Joseph to win the game.
Yeah.
He didn't want Ivy and Hayes to lose the game. I think that's what that was.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to put that, he didn't want those kids to have that baggage. And so he took them out and he left those veterans in, and it turned out they won the game. But I don't think it was so much about Burks winning the game as much as it was about Ivy and Hayes possibly self-destructing and losing the game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and I think that's a great way to put it. Sometimes you just have to put things set aside developing players and win a game occasionally, especially when it's there for the taking. If that means playing the veterans, you play the veterans and get that win, because you got to show players how to win, in the league. It's just how it is. But yeah, it makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. I just hope we get to see a few more wins this year before the season ends, because this is probably a 20-win team again, unfortunately. But what are you going to do? You can't predict injuries. You can't plan for injuries. And, in the long run, it might be for the best, with other players getting to step up, and maybe they get lucky in the lottery. And, 5 years from now, we're saying, boy, because remember what happened when David Robinson got hurt with the Spurs. They were able to draft Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
So, maybe, maybe the Pistons could get lucky like that. So, but yeah, it's,
well, they're going to get a good player. I mean,
they will get a good player. You're right. Exactly.
They're not going to. They may not get the big kid, but they're going to get a good player.
Right. Yeah, we have to remember, and we could say the same about wherever that Rams pick ends up with the Lions.
Yeah,
they're going to get a good player. They may not get the edge out of Alabama. They may not get a quarterback, but they will get a good player with that pick, and he should be a starter, and that's what we need to hope for. So. All right. Now, Greg, we need to get your sea legs back under you. Who's your jerk of the week? You haven't nominated one in a while.
I know I have. Before I do that, I wanted to give a shout out to my man, Jose Ramirez at Eastern Michigan.
Yeah.
who was named second. He's a defensive lineman who had a great year for the Eagles.
Yeah.
I think it's Jose Ramirez. Hold on here. Let me get it up and make sure I get it right now.
Yeah.
And
while you're at it, what bowl game is Eastern playing in?
Yeah, Eastern's playing tomorrow night as we tape this, the 16th.
They're playing. It's tomorrow
in Idaho.
Yeah.
The Potato Bowl against
the
San
famous
Jose
Idaho
State.
Potato Bowl. Yes.
Against San Jose State, the rematch of the 1987 California Bowl. But Jose Ramirez was named second team All-Pro.
All-Pro.
All-American. All-American.
Wow.
As a defensive lineman, he had a fantastic season. This kid's going to play in the NFL. I don't know where, and I don't know that he'll be drafted on the first day necessarily. But this kid Ramirez, keep an eye on him. He is a sack machine.
Yeah.
And he was the anchor of that Eastern defense all year long. So good on him. Second team All-American. Very proud of him. So remember that name, Jose Ramirez. Now, as far as Jerk of the Week goes, as you know, the World Cup is droning on.
Yeah.
And earlier, unfortunately, we had a tragedy with the journalist Grant Wall passing away. My Jerk of the Week, though, are all these people, I mean, not just random people, but like media people and people who should know better, who just all jumped on it's foul play.
Yeah.
And the people of Qatar, or Qatar, I guess is how you pronounce it. The people of Qatar have blood on their hands, and all this jumping to conclusions. Oh, he was killed because he was pro LBGT, and he was outspoken, and he was clearly, even his brother, even Grant Wall's brother initially said, this is fishy. Well, and people really went hard on that they really laid the blame on this, on the host country. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that Grant Wall died of a burst blood, essentially an aneurysm in his aorta, which is of course instant death. And his wife, who's a renowned virologist, who's actually was part of President Biden's coronavirus team,
right?
Said, well, he probably didn't feel any pain. He probably died instantly, because when it burst, you're done with. You're over with. You can't be saved. So lo and behold, now it turns out there was no foul play. He died. He was. I get it. He was only 49. I understand that, but unfortunately, it's the same kind of thing that, by the way, that killed John Ritter. Same kind of a thing. It sucks, and it's what are you going to do about it? But it was not foul play. So this rush to judgment, Al.
Yeah.
On social media all the time. I mean, people were they couldn't be convinced otherwise. He was absolutely was killed.
Yep.
He was poisoned. Something happened to this guy, and they just wouldn't accept the fact that a man of his age could have died. And even though he told everybody, I don't feel well. I've been battling. My body feels like it's about to give out. Nobody wanted to hear that when his death was announced. Everybody went immediately to foul play without any sort of proof whatsoever. Even his own brother did that.
Yeah.
Well, my Jerk of the Week is just those people that just jumped to conclusions and just said Grant Wall must have been killed. Grant Wall, Qatar has blood on their hands. Well, no. Nothing fishy about it. He had a aneurysm, and that's the end of the story. So,
right.
That just bothers me when it's one thing for some random guy with 50 followers to say that, but these were the people out that were saying this about Grant Wall death were people with tons of followers who should know better.
Yeah.
Who should not have leaped to that kind of a conclusion.
Right.
And there's always this, and the same thing that happened to John Heyman real quick. He leaped to conclusions about Aaron Judge going to the Giants, and of course that didn't happen. Everybody wants to be the first instead of to be accurate.
Yeah. Right.
And frankly, it does a disservice to Grant Wall and his family for them to be put through this, to have everybody say that he's the victim of foul play. And it turns out it was just a medical situation.
Right.
So that's my Jerk of the Week.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things we could go off on Qatar World Cup about. That wasn't one of them, unfortunately. He was at first he was sick, and I think people he said when people rushed to judgment about that, they forgot to mention it. Wall himself said he had been overworking, he had been working too hard, and he felt awful. And it's a damn shame too because he was the when you talk about soccer writing in the United States, it's him. He was the guy. So it was a damn shame what happened to him. And that's a good call on the rush to judgment that it was immediately, the Qataris killed him. Oh my goodness, yeah. All right, there's so many ways I could go with my jerk of the week. I thought about going back of our buddy Carlos Monterez for some of his stupidity he's been spewing out. The latest one of the ones that got me was. Did the Lions wait? Should the Lions have given Williams the number 9? Was it too soon after Matthew Stafford? Oh my God! Good Lord! But that would have been too easy. So, I could actually go with a few of the columnists around here who have really been writing up a lot of puff pieces about the Lions lately. They really have. They've kind of gone a little. They've kind of really course corrected, I think, a little too much, almost to the point where they're acting like they're going to make the playoffs. It's still a long shot. But I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos, specifically Russell Wilson. Have you seen a quarterback decline so badly, so quickly as Russell Wilson? And now the knives are out. It turns out, I think to no one's surprise, that the guy's been a diva for years. Like he had his own office in the facilities of Seattle, and that Seattle literally coddled him to keep him happy. And it was causing problems in the locker room. It really turns out that Russell Wilson, I don't think anybody's surprised, is a quarterback with a diva wide receiver personality. And he has fallen off so bad this year. The Broncos are 3-9. His quarterback rating has dropped like almost 25 points from. It was 103 last year, which is his lowest in a few, but it's now like 85. He's also looked like a journeyman. He looks like a completely different ball player, and it's not helping that his attitude seems to be rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. We're seeing a lot of stuff going on on the sidelines of people getting upset with Wilson. And there's also the fact that the contract that he was given, was it, I believe, 5 years, $250 million extension. You know what his dead cap hit would be if he's cut this offseason? $107 million.
Oh, boy.
You can't, it's literally impossible for Denver to move on from Wilson for about 4 seasons. I actually brought up Sport Track. That's the go-to site for contract news. And it says here, the earliest potential realistic out for Denver on Russell Wilson is 2026, where the cap hit is $31 million, which is essentially what Jared Goff is making this year in salary. So, but yeah, it's really gotten ugly in Denver. And Russell Wilson, the bloom has come off the rose with him. And, it's Denver once again went all in on an old quarterback like they did with Peyton Manning. At least with Manning, they had a world-beating defense to drag him across the finish line. That right now, Denver, they have a coach that looks like he's going to get fired. They have a quarterback nobody likes, and this quarterback has an untenable contract. The Denver Broncos, once were like a model franchise, they just look like they're just going to be struggling for years now. I don't know what they're going to do. So, my jerk of the week of the Broncos are Russell Wilson, just for being the Broncos and Russell Wilson.
Yeah, the Broncos have been. I'm looking back now. I didn't realize how many years now they've been down. They've been down since, gosh, I'm going back now to 2016 was their last winning season.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been down for sure. A lot of double-digit losses in there too.
And they're going to fire their coach. There's no way they can keep a coach this year, and they're stuck with Wilson, and looks like he's in a bad decline. So that's going to be interesting to watch, just to see how they're going to try and fix what's broken there, because it's badly broken in Denver. It's good to see another franchise in dire straits other than the Lions. I'll say that much. All right. With that, let's get the hell out of here. We're running long, but we had a lot to talk about because Greg has been on a walkabout essentially for 2 months. So he's been out in the Australian outback for all I know. But no, he has some stuff at home that things have gotten better. So he's doing good. But we need to wrap things up. So, Greg, if you get out the thank yous, anything else that's on your mind before we get out of here?
Sure. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. Read my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Just Google Greg Eno Out of Bounds, and you'll find it. And if you do find it, please bookmark it or mark it on your favorites somehow, and come back to me pretty much every Monday. I would appreciate that. I'm also on LinkedIn. Hit me there, Greg Eno. And of course, I've got to thank my lovely wife Sharon, for putting up with this stuff, and for you, Big Al, for making, in this case, Thursday nights so gosh darn fun.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, and thank you for coming back to the show. I mean, you almost got replaced. It was close.
Came back just in time.
Just in time before you got Wally pipped, or as I was joking with Nick that for the kids, you almost got Drew Bledsoe. He was Tom Brady coming in. So, but I'm glad you're back. It's a lot of fun talking to you. I've missed it. So glad you're back. And as a note, we'll probably be back in 2 weeks on a regular schedule. But then I'm leaving town, so we'll do one more show, and then our next show after that. We'll do a show at the end of the month. And then our next show will probably be like the 3rd week of January. That's the way things are looking right now. We'll see what's going on, because there might be a lot to talk about if the Lions continue this late season run. And there's always the University of Michigan, who are playing in the national championship semifinal. So they could have a national championship game coming up. We'll have to wait and see. But that's the schedule as it sits for right now. We'll see where it goes from there. But okay, let's get out if you want to listen to the show. It's been so long here. I got to scroll down. Remember, as Greg said, you can find us on social media, the usual places such as Facebook and Twitter. Just look for the Knee Jerks. If you want to listen to the show, we're available in all the usual places where you find podcasts. Any place there's podcasts hosted, just search the Knee Jerks, search Eno and Big Al. You can download, subscribe via any of the service you like. But the main ones are Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer. TheJerks.net is the homepage if you want to look for any show notes. If you want to find the links to the things we've talked about, find the links to social media. And that's where you can download the MP3 if you don't want to go through the app stores thing, so to speak. As always, Greg, it's been a pleasure. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think we've covered it all. So with that out of the way, I want to say I think that's it. Let's get the hell out of here. It's late. So until this time, 2 weeks from now, hopefully we'll be talking about a continued Lions playoff run and maybe a Tigers trade and some healthy Red Wings. Until that time, we'll see you 2 weeks from now. So this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.